everybody, my name is Natalia Leigh and I'm the author of the young adult novels Highborn and Way of Spears, and today I am going to share my process of editing with you. Today will only be step one of the editing process, which for me is annotations. Alright, let's get started. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's say you have just finished writing your novel. It's still in Scrivener or it's in Word, it's wherever. So I used to edit on the computer screen. Like I would finish up, I would let the novel sit for a while, and then I would go straight back to the computer screen and start editing. But that did not work for me for very long because I found that once I started editing, I would forget what I had changed. And then I would have to go back and reread everything, and it was taking up a lot of time and it wasn't very efficient. So what I started doing, and I have done this for my past two novels, Way of Spears and Song of the Dryad, is I will finish writing the novel and then I will upload it to CreateSpace and order myself a proof copy. And I do believe that it's really important to take some time away from your novel after you finished writing it, just so that you can gain some objectivity regarding what you wrote. You're not so close to it anymore, so it's really positive to take a step back. And for me, uploading everything to CreateSpace takes a few days, and then it takes, a week, 2 weeks to actually receive the copy in the mail. So by the time I finally receive it on my doorstep, I have taken some time away from the project and I'm ready to dive back in. Okay, so I have ordered my proof copy. The proof copy has finally arrived. What is the first thing that I do? After I receive it, it's time to just dive right in. And what I will do is read through the entire novel, and I will actually make notes on everything. I've heard a lot of people talk about how they like to kind of divide and conquer when it comes to editing. So on their first read through, they're just focusing on structure and plot, and then maybe they'll read through again and focus on character arcs, and then they'll read it again and they'll focus on spelling. But that actually doesn't work for me, because when I am reading through a proof copy of my book, if I come across something that is spelled incorrectly or that sounds really awkward, I will always make a note of it. And the reason people will tell you not to do this is because you might end up chopping a lot out or changing a lot. So those small edits that you did for grammar, punctuation, or spelling may become irrelevant because you've chopped entire, paragraphs or chapters out, and then all the work you did to change all those words is kind of lost. But because of the outlining method I use and the plotting and planning method that I use, I don't have major plot holes in my novels because I've already filled all of those in the plotting and planning stages. So by the time I actually receive a proof copy, I know that there aren't going to be huge structural changes that I'm going to need to make. I will definitely chop out some stuff, I'll change descriptions and stuff like that. So words will absolutely be getting changed. But I still really like to mark everything that I'm spelling wrong so that I know not to make those mistakes anymore. I like to mark things that sound awkward or don't flow well. And part of this for me is just the way that my mind works. I am not able to separate a structural edit from a grammatical edit. I want to do it all at once. I want to do it all on the first sweep through so that every time I'm going through it, it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I can't just read over a passage and note that I spelled something incorrectly or that it sounds really awkward and then just ignore it, because I do not want to miss that on the second edit or the third edit. I would rather note everything down right away so that I have it by the time I have finished my read through and I'm ready to start actually editing. Now, a tip I have for you here, and something that I make sure to always do, is to finish the entire read through and finish all of the annotations before I return to my Word document or to my Scrivener document. I used to annotate a few chapters and then I would return to Scrivener and start making changes. But I found that if I was doing that, I would actually forget which changes had already been made, and then I would get really confused. Like I mentioned earlier, if I was just editing on the screen versus actually having a proof copy. So I would get super confused. I would no longer know, what the story was like, because if I have one story in the proof copy and then I go through and I start editing before I'm done annotating this, that means that the story in the proof copy is no longer the story on my Scrivener document. And I don't like that. It makes me confused. So I always make sure to finish reading and annotating the entire book before I go back and make any changes on my Scrivener document. Now I am going to go through one of my old books and show you how I annotate it, but I want to mention to you that it's really important to note all of the passages and chapters and phrases and characters that you really love when you're doing annotations like this. I think people sometimes look at editing as a way to, rip their work apart and get rid of all the stuff that's bad. And while editing definitely makes your novel stronger and it cleans it up and makes it shine, it's not just about hating on it and ripping it apart. I always make certain to write little notes to myself when I really love something. So you'll see here that I wrote, love this paragraph. I will make kind notes like that to myself for paragraphs, chapters, dialogue, characters, because again, editing isn't just about being hard on yourself and being hard on your work. It's also about falling in love with your characters and your story and the work that you have put into it. So I always make sure to include positive and uplifting comments for myself because they keep me motivated and excited to work on my project rather than approaching it as if it's something that just needs to be fixed. Okay, so now that I have given you a little bit of backstory and information as to my thought processes while I am annotating, I am now going to actually show you what the annotations will look like in my proof copy. Okay friends, so this is an old proof copy of my first novel, Highborn, and I'm going to go through this with you and show you what I might write down for annotations for a proof copy. So I turn the page. All right, so I like that the chapter heading is moved down, but I'm actually not a big fan about how these page numbers look up there. So here's another thing I'll do. I'm going to circle this and say move to footer because I want it down there. All right, let's see. I like how this looks, so that's fine. But now I'm noticing that this space over here is a bit too wide. So see how the text is definitely shoved into what we call the gutter here, but I want to move this text out a little bit. So I'll say format text, and it needs to move out there. So see, I haven't even started getting into the novel yet, but I'm noticing formatting errors, so I'm making a note of that as well. So even as I read here, I'm going to say, I'm going to circle this and say change term, because I don't like how that little phrase sounds. All right, and then I read on, and I read this little line of dialogue here, and I actually really like how this line of dialogue sounds. So I'll put brackets around it, and then I'll say fun dialogue. Gives character personality. So you can see here that I'm definitely not afraid to really cover my pages in text. I really enjoy just being free-form about it and writing all of my ideas down. All right, so this line, the bricks were overgrown with thick green moss and tall grass had grown up around the base. I really like this description here. So again, I'm going to bracket it and say, love description. This paragraph here, the leaves floated toward the forest, a place that most folks of Rivermore did their best to avoid. Parents told their children stories about the forest to frighten them, if only to make sure they never ventured inside. Dangerous things lurked within, or so everyone said. I'm going to put a bracket around this and say cultural backstory. So here I am building up the city of Rivermore and I'm giving readers an idea about what the people there are like and, their fears and kind of folklore that surrounds this place. So I need to remember that this is the cultural backstory I'm building so that if I change it up in the following pages, I know that I always need to return to this. Oh, so right here, night had settled over Rivermore, comma, and a pale moon was rising in the east. I don't need that comma there, so I'm just gonna go ahead and exit out. All right, now right here, all of this italics, this is something that I wrote as a dream. So I might bracket this and say formatting, because maybe I need to do some more research and discover exactly how I should be formatting dreams or flashbacks. So I'll make notes like this to myself to remind myself to go and do a little bit more research so that I make sure that I'm formatting everything correctly. See again, love this line. I'll make a note about that. Okay, so here's a good example of something. So at the beginning of this paragraph, I write, "It was bustling with activity." And this right here, "was bustling," is an example of passive voice, and I would rather make that active voice. So I'm going to change this to bustled. It bustled with activity, and that's referring to a busy kitchen in a castle. It bustled with activity instead of saying it was bustling with activity. So I'll say bustled and then make a note, active voice. So I will want to change that as much as possible as I go through my proof copy to make sure I'm writing an active voice. Let's see, I like the dialogue here. So here our main character is actually speaking to a member of the royal family, and I noted that I like this dialogue that is spoken by the member of the royal family because it sounds very different from how our main character, who is a commoner, would speak. So I made sure to make a note of that. Right now here, I might do this again. So this is a note that was written, and I might say formatting again. You know, is that how I should be formatting a written note in my book? I'm not sure, so I will research that. And then what I always like to do when I reach the end of the chapter is to make kind of a summary of how I felt. So I might say good character development, but then I might also pose a question myself. Does it move too slow? So posing questions like this to myself will make me wonder, oh, okay, does it move too slow? Maybe I need to pick up the pacing. Maybe I need to start the chapter in a different place or with the characters doing something more active or interesting. So I always like to, you know, either write a summary of what I am feeling or do a bullet pointed list of what I think was good about the chapter and what I thought could use a little bit of work. And then sometimes you might even see me doing things like completely Xing chapters out or Xing, paragraphs out because I've decided that I no longer need those in my book or that something has changed. But I am, like I said, I am very comfortable with really writing all over my books. And this is what most of the pages will end up looking like. There will be notes on actual formatting. There will be notes on grammar and on spelling and punctuation, on dialogue, character, building the world here. So I make notes regarding everything when I'm going through this first round of annotations. But remember, I will not return to my document on my computer until this entire book has been annotated. Okay, now before we go, I did receive a question on Instagram, so I want to make sure that I get that answered. So the question I received on Instagram is, do you do your first round of edits on your computer or do you find it easier to print the document? So I used to do my first round of edits on the computer. Again, it was quicker and I wanted to dive right back into it and start editing right away. But I no longer do that because one, I need distance from my project before I start editing, and two, editing a physical copy just really allows me to read it like a reader would, to read my words as if I am not the writer, if that makes sense. Because when I'm reading my words on the computer screen, it's very apparent that I am the one that wrote them. And because of that, I feel a little bit too close to them. But when I actually have it printed out like this, whether you decide to get a proof copy and have it bound, or whether you print it all out on a printer at home, whatever you choose to do, I do find that having it in a print copy with actual words on a page helps me feel less like the writer and more like a reader, and that helps me to edit clearly and, again, like I said, to kind of feel distance from the work that I've created. Now, after all of this is done, and I'm actually really close to being done with Song of the Dryad, I am on page 426 out of 475, so about 50 pages remain. until I will be done with the annotations for this. And what I'll do when I'm finished with that is flip back to page 1, open up my Scrivener document, and actually get started with making changes. But it's not time for that quite yet. And when I am ready for that step, I will be making videos about that process. So I am definitely going to take you along with me on this journey through editing Song of the Dryad. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. I have been really excited to start sharing these editing videos with you as I move through the editing process for Song of the Dryad. So you can definitely expect to see more editing videos in the future. If you have any requests for videos regarding revision, annotation, and editing, please let me know in the comments down below so that I can make sure to add those to my list of videos that need to be filmed. All right, as always, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!